At the turn of the tide, I can see an innate desire. Sword in hand, warriors side by side. I can feel it, it burns like fire. Worlds collide, an unstable landscape, side by side. But that's what this mandates. Be it might, an unlikely allegiance. We will fight because that's the best defense. No turning back for such is our path. This day we find a glorious death. Glorious death. Our goal, our mission is clear. As we ride against a dark empire. By my soul, may the last thing they hear be the roar of this raging fire. Disobey the savagery mindset. Not today, we'll let loose and find it. Brutal will define our reaction. Rip out the throat of each one imperfection. No turning back, for such is our path. This day we find the
Services has a bundle for all budgets. You can be fully protected with emergency response for just $49.99.
Okay, hey guys, Joker here. Of course, I am live, and of course, as Ram said in the chat, Eric July, or I should say, the Rippaverse, is live right now. They're doing a closeout stream for Death Shroud, which is sold over 1,000 books. So I could actually pull up the. Let's see, we can not this one. Share this tab instead right here. Oop. Let's see. Oh yes, we gotta move and remove, and then we can add that to the stage right there. So you see, got a live stream going on about the Death Shroud closeout stream. So the Rams listening to both. That's a bit like weird to have like two streams, like two like flow bits of information going on. But I appreciate it, Ram, that you're watching. So initially, what I wanted to talk about, and I guess I'll put myself in the solo layout out here, is talking about Rippaverse and video games, because that was going on. I believe Eric did a live stream this morning, and he did one like a couple days ago talking about video games, like realistic video games. So it's something they're seriously considering, and something that's probably going to happen within the coming months, where we'll probably get some sort of announcement. Of course, I've talked about that multiple times. One of the first episodes of Braxcast that I ever did was me talking about video games you could realistically put out. And I had mentioned something like, I forget the one that Garfield mentioned exactly, but something like Double Dragon would be like a really realistic game. I was talking about this a couple streams ago, like a Contra game where you play as horsemen, like a side-scrolling game that's modeled after Contra, but you play as horsemen, would be a really cool game to make. And I think that would be one that does really well. And if you, of course, have a game that you put out at the $20 price point, let's say you spend between $100,000 and $200,000 developing it, or I should say $102,000 developing it, maybe $50,000 to $200,000. That could be like the range of development, depending on how complex it is, how much it is. But I think you could get something like that where, you know, it's maybe like a 5 to 10 hour experience. You have like a replay mode. You can have people make their own levels with mods, so you can get some more replay value out of it. Of course, and you release that on Steam and it does well, you could make, I mean, you could break even, you could make a couple $1,000,000 off of that. It just depends on how well it does, how it jives with the fans, especially if you get it on like Switch and PlayStation. I mean, Xbox a little bit, but like, especially select the Switch, since Switch is sold over 100 million. Switch 2, people have their issues with it. I got one. I like it. A lot of people have issues with Nintendo and the Switch 2. And of course, Nintendo, even after releasing Switch, even though so many people bought the Switch and people love the Switch, there's still like Nintendo's gone really corporate since the Switch era. After, like, you know, Iwata unfortunately passed back in 15, Nintendo lost a lot of the charm that made them like so beloved. And while the Switch is a good piece of hardware, the concept's really good, and a lot of the games are really good. Like Donkey Kong Bonanza on the Switch is really good. Mario Kart World, overpriced, but it's still a fun game. Yeah, eShop does pretty well for indies, from what I heard. Exactly, Mike. So if you get a Rippaverse game on Switch for $20, you could get the Rippaverse to a whole new audience if it just becomes like a big thing. Like if you got a good Horseman game, it's a game like Katana Zero. I remember playing that on Switch. That was a really fun game. And you could just have it, if it gets big on the eShop, it gets on that like bestsellers page, because, you know, us the fans go in and we just swarm by it, and it gets that in front of whole new people. You could make 7 figures off of that if they play their cards right. And like I said, if you're spending between like $50,000 and $200,000 making that game, you could have a massive return on investment, and you could use that to bankroll not like a God of War, like AAA epic style game where you know, third person playing as Yaira flying around. That'd be really cool. That's a dream game, right? Or like an MMORPG where you make your own Rippaverse character. I believe it was like, I'm sure of like DC Universe or whatever that was. That's, I think, what Eric wants, is like action MMORPG where you create your own Accept and you play in Forest Park and the surrounding Rippaverse, of course. But that's a multi-million-dollar, not just to like make the base game, but then of course like maintaining server space and then having an on, you know, team like dev staff that's working between 40, 80 hours a week maintaining the game. It racks up really quickly. It's why Blizzard has to be owned by a corporation like got bought out by Activision, and of course then they got bought out by Microsoft. It takes a massive amount of money to maintain an MMORPG, and if you want to have that in link with action, like action combat system, means you're going to have a lot of development just to make the base game. And like I said, all the support is a whole other beast. You're going to be spending probably hundreds of $1,000s a month just to maintain the servers, and then of course the payroll for, like I said, a team of devs to make sure that the game is functional and that it's not crashing all the time. So that's the thing there. Of course, that's something that's like down the line when they've made a lot of money. So, but like I said, make a smaller single player game that's based off of the indie games always go, not always, but a lot of them are based off the pixel art 16 and 8-bit era. I'd say more 16-bit because that's the peak of the retro gaming style. The retro gaming craze is with the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, that being 16-bit. Of course, there's more fidelity than you would have on those consoles because you can do a lot more with the modern engines, even if you're going for that 2D style, especially something like Octopath Traveler, if they're like HD 2D. If you have something like that, and like I said, if you're spending $50,000 to $200,000 and you get it in front of a whole new audience and it jives with them because it's a good game, you can make several million off of that. And then you bankroll that into making bigger and better games. You bankroll that into doing animations, and then you can justify having those things, and then you could be at the point where justifying loss leader. So I really think the Rippaverse is at a pretty opportune time to make one of these low risk games. So like Mike has bad news saying, like getting the couch co-op side-scrolling brawlers to beat 'em ups myself. So yeah, if you make a beat 'em up game that you can play with like 4 players and you play as like any except and just go through a bunch of levels, that would work fantastic. And you could get a lot of people to buy that. You put that on Steam, you put that in the eShop, you put that on the PlayStation Store, and get that on Xbox. And sure, like I said, it's going to cost you a bit of money to get like the dev team and then all the dev kits and then all the like approval fees. Like Steam's a lot cheaper to publish games on, but if you want to do PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, you got to buy a dev kit, you got to pay the licensing fees, of course. So it costs a bit of money, but it's not prohibitively expensive. So it's a realistic thing for them to do. And I really think, like I said, they're at a really opportune time to do this. We've got 13 people watching me, even though Rippaverse is live streaming now about the Death Shroud closeout, which is really cool. I did back that book. I will be reviewing that book. And of course, it's a collected edition. It's got new content as well as old stuff. So I'm really excited to get my hands on that. Chad seems like a cool guy. Would love to interview him, pick his brain. But I've been super busy. And of course, this week's been really crazy, man, for me. But fortunately, things are looking up for me. So I'm going to be going back to the day shift. So when I was on the Horseman 1 round table, I was kind of like passing out, like dozing off. I'm really sorry about that. If you guys watched that, I wasn't as talkative as I usually am. But I had just come back from working my weekend job. And usually when I was on the schedule where it's working nights, I would just pass out afterwards because during the weekend, I'm not working the overnight job. So my body would I just lie in bed, I just pass out just to try and catch up on sleep. That's what my body was doing. And that's usually what would happen. But on Saturday, I was like, got to push through, got to do the stream because you guys like it. And I was kind of nodding off a little bit because of that. So I really apologize. But now, got a daytime job by the grace of God. So I will be, I have the luxury of sleeping at night, which means, I'll have to go to bed, like pretty early again, like, 9 o'clock, 10. So like a couple hours from now, I'll have to go to sleep if I want to wake up at the times that I usually do, where I'm heading to the gym at 5, posting the daily poll before 5 a.m., which is, what I was doing. But I'll be sleeping more consistently. And yeah, thanks, Ram. So things are looking up, even though it's been a crazy week for me. It ended really well. I had like so much stuff, but I don't need to get into like my my woes earlier in the week. It's all past you. Mike has bad news. Says he hasn't backed Death Shroud. He's asking if he should. So we can check Death Shroud. And of course, there's also an Isom Omnibus, and That's releasing on Labor Day. Of course, that's the 1st of September. And we've got Garfield's Bizarre Adventure and Zayd Comics in the chat. Absolutely fantastic to see you guys. Really love to see you guys showing up for my live stream. We got 22 people in here. Who retweeted me? I believe oh yeah, a student of God who retweeted me. Very nice, a student of God. But this is like the most I've ever had at like one point. So if you're new here, like and subscribe. I do the Braxcast every Saturday. I've got a really cool interview coming out tomorrow. So you guys are going to want to subscribe and tune in on Saturday. Not only will I be reviewing, wait for it. So I got Ripazine number 4 in, and I'm going to be reviewing that on the next episode of the Braxcast, of course. Yeah, Student of God is doing God's works. Edwin Boyette as well. But yeah, I mean, he was more involved in the drama side of things, and that's not necessarily what I like to do. But he's pushed back, or he's pulled back from doing that because it's just so nonsensical. But like I said, I will be reviewing Ripazine 4 on tomorrow's episode of the Braxcast. So I'll be talking about Catch and Kill. I think this is the best issue of the Ripazine yet, number 4. There's like one minor thing, and I'll mention that in tomorrow's, but it's a really well formatted. I really like the release schedule of the Ripazine. Andrew's doing a knockout job with that. Of course, the Saskas did a really good job. Let's see. Oh my god! Oh, dude, to Ramshock, Catch and Kill was great. Yeah, Catch and Kill was a really good stream. Got 30 people in here, man. That's a lot of people. I think I've almost got as many people as uh Eric has. So I don't know, maybe I don't know why. Let's see. Garfield read Catch and Kill. Love seeing Forest Park from a journalist perspective. I did as well. And there's a lot of stuff with Catch and Kill that has, like, I would say, implications. I guess that's a good term to use. But you read that, it's like, oh man, like you can see how Winslow could be sleuthing around and really like connecting the dots. Of course, I think, as time gets on, and they're, publishing more content, there's like going to be like little things. I think there was like one thing Mike Partika was talking about with like Yaira being in costume, and Isom number 2 when they're talking about her, and that being like a minor thing in a continuity error. So there's going to be continuity errors that are going to be noticed, but it's a really minor thing. But I wanted to talk about this since, let's see, Death Shroud, Forge and Shadow is part 1, and we can do this in the full screen layout. We can actually do this like that. Nah, we can actually do this like this. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. So this is, of course, the campaign for Death Shroud. It is closing today, but like Mike Has Bad Knees says, this is going to be available on the store. So if you can't get to it now, then of course you can always buy it after the fact. I do remember backing this, so I got the basic one. This is a 192 pager, so this is new content along with additional content. Kanan White is actually one of the artists on this book, and they're doing a live stream right now to close this out. So if you're more interested in Death Shroud, I would recommend you guys watching this. But if you're interested in Braxcast, of course, got 36 people in here. Very, very thankful. It's like really big. You guys are really blowing this up. So very fortunate. Although it seems like most of you guys are lurkers, which absolutely fine with. So Mike Has Bad Knee says Ripazine 4 coming with his Saints and Sinners order, which I don't like bundling stuff like that because, of course, I'm like the Rippaverse review guy, or like one of them. There's American Texan who's doing reviews. Of course, there's let's see, Weapon X, Ginger Wolverine, I believe. He was going to be on stream today. He had something come up. But if I can get him on, people, I believe Garfield was talking about getting him on. Invite's always open. So I'll send him, every week. If he can't come on next week, he can't come on the week after that. That ought to be, it's perfectly okay. But I want to have him on eventually, and it'll be really cool. But there's plenty of people who do Rippaverse reviews, but since like I'm one of them and I do the Braxcast, like, hey, I want to get everything like when it fulfills, so that way like I can get my review out like while the fulfillment is happening for basically everybody. And of course, while it's still like fresh in the that first wave of people, which is includes Ripazine 4, so I don't want to bundle it with everything. Let's see, Saints and Sinners should be fulfilling next month, according to Eric, which is really exciting. This is the first anthology from the Rippaverse, so it's going to be a really cool one. Speaking of anthology, still have Power Trip to review. I got free books left to review this month. The month was almost over. August just flew right on by. Man, it's going to be winter before we know it, which is insane to think about. Almost the same as me having 40 viewers. What are you guys doing here? There's a Rippaverse live stream. You guys are watching me. Absolutely love that. But I did want to talk about the Isom Omnibus. So of course we did have this Isom Omnibus, collection show up here. So I'll play this trailer. Why not? And then we can talk about that. We can talk about Rippaverse games. Of course, just do random talking about streams or random talking on the stream, because that's what live streams usually devolve into for me. Okay, yeah, now that's a really basic one. So I imagine it's going to be that. Probably going to have some special, things associated with that, maybe like a shirt or something like that. But a basic collected edition of Isom. Of course, there's going to be an Isom 2 remastered. I believe that's going to be included in the years 1 through 3. I imagine this will be included in that as well. Like I said, there's a minor continuity error in Isom 2 that's going to be addressed with Yaira. Really minor though, and of course, stems more from the fact that people are very whatever. You can see the Yaira poster behind me. You can see the statue of Yaira behind me. People are used to seeing Yaira in her costume, even though she gets at the end of Yaira 1. So that's how we knew Yaira. That's how Cliff drew her in that one. That's what people are used to seeing. That's what people think of when they see Yaira. But she didn't have the costume yet at that time. Really, really minor thing. Of course, something they ought to have caught, but when you're just starting things up, stuff like that happens. Hold up, what continuity error in Isom 2? So I'll show. I just saw this right now, and I think it's a minor thing, but let me go and get my copy of Isom number 2, and I will show you. Okay, so we are back, and I'm going to find this really quick. So it comes at the beginning of no, not sure if it's the beginning, but let's see. Man, this is so entertaining, man. Glad you guys are sticking with me. But I need to find it. If I can find, if I'll ever find the one page in this comic book I'm looking for, that would be fantastic. But I really ought to know. Here we go. So, I dropped my Ripazine, but that's okay. I'll pick it up. So you see this right here. So this is Yaira in costume in Isom 2, or in Isom 2. So they have a picture of her in Isom 2 in her costume. Play some searching. I ought to have some searching music, but I don't. But yeah, I think Streamlabs lets me play background music. I need to since I paid for Streamlabs, I really ought to use that. But if you see, let me put the mic down. Hopefully you guys can still hear me. But if you see, you've got Yaira here in costume. She shouldn't be in costume at this point because her costume comes at the end of Yaira number 1, and of course at the end of Yaira number 1. Or after the events of Yaira number 1. So after she gets her costume, she's presumed to be dead. So she shouldn't have the costume then. So she gets her costume after the events of Isom number 1. So when that scene is happening, when they're talking about how they couldn't catch Yaira, that's when she shouldn't have the costume, right? She shouldn't have the costume in that picture. So it's a really minor thing, and of course, it's more along the lines people just used to seeing Yaira depicted like that, so that's how Cliff drew her, which I think is let's say fine, but it's like it's a minor thing. But of course, stuff like that happens, man. And I'm sure Marvel, DC have tons of continuity errors that people are going to be a bit soft on. But like I said, that's going to be something that's going to get addressed. My God, almost 50 people in here. I think if I can see how many, I'm not even sure. It's like around the amount of people that are watching the Rippaverse channel. So I'm really grateful for you guys. But like I said, any of you guys are new here, consider subscribing. I could do Rippaverse reviews if you're interested in Rippaverse. I do a bunch of comic reviews. Of course, I got the Substack. If you check out my links on substack.com or velvetroompublishing.com, that takes you to my Substack. I've written 3 books, gotta write more. Now I'm on the day shift. Hopefully I'll have more time to find. See on Twitter. Mark Particchia, he found that, he pointed that out, or somebody pointed out to him, and then he made a short about it, and I watched that. And he's left comments on my reviews. Of course, the one review of mine that he liked was my Dark Harvest review, since I was critical of that. I kind of like Dark Harvest. It's an okay book. I think I waited about like 18 months to get it, for something, and I paid, I don't know, a little under $30 for something that I would have paid like, I don't know, I bought Battle Beast 5 for less than $10, or not Battle Beast, like issues of Battle Beast, right? Pay less than $5 for that. You get it right away. You give the money and then you get it, you take it home, you read it. Like I got to read Battle. It's right there on my table. I got to read and review Battle Beast 4 because I'm keeping up with that. Buying the monthly, of course, for myself because I like it, and then I review them, and I make short reviews because they're short issues, but they're really kind of that. Yeah, he is, but the thing I like about that it's just like it's what nerds do. It's like where you're combing through everything, you're finding the little thing. So I don't think I don't think he's like a malicious actor where he's trying to like do this to degrade people or I don't know, be slanderous or libelous. I think he's just someone who has like I don't know, he's just a nerd. So like when he gets into disagreements with me, when he said my reviews are bad, of course, I think he was most offended over my Gooding review, one where I said that Gooding was a book that I liked. He was scandalized by that. How could I possibly like Gooding? How could I possibly like any Rippaverse book when they're so poorly made? But I read them, I give my honest thoughts on them. That's why I do the Rippaverse content, because I've been a fan since Isom 1. He's making plenty of stuff, and I got 52 people here watching right now. I've got almost 160 subscribers, and when I started doing all this, Braxcast Live especially, it's been like really good for the channel, of course, comparatively, because their channels have thousands and thousands of subs and blow up overnight. It's been a slow growth, but I had less than 100 subscribers. Got like 160 right now. Probably get a couple more of you guys to subscribe, like I said. Like to stream, subscribe. I do a lot of Rippaverse content. I do these streams every week. I definitely want to live stream more. If you guys, Lord willing, a lot of you guys watch. I get monetized on YouTube. You buy my books on velvetroompublishing.com. The Substack has the links to buy that, and I make money off of this. Then I can quit the second job. I even will quit the main job if enough people support it. But I'm a bit of a ways from that. But if this makes enough money for me, then I don't have to, work a job on the weekends, and I can spend more time running Velvet Room Publishing, which is what I want to do. But that's not where I'm at now. I gotta work to, pay the bills, which of course I'm not going to complain about. But again, if you guys want to support Velvet Room Publishing, I can invest more into that, and that includes more Rippaverse coverage for you guys. So consider subscribing. Considering checking out the donation link for the PayPal if you guys like what I do and want to support it. If not, that's totally okay. But yes, so like I said, Rippaverse video games. And of course, I don't want to go necessarily share this entire, of course, probably ought to do this like that, this entire stream, but he's done 2 live streams so far. Let's see. You plan on changing the name of your channel, Ram? I actually don't, because I like calling it Velvet Room Publishing. Because that I want to put out more than just Rippaverse content on this channel. So if I do comics, I want to upload. If I do comics myself, I want to upload trailers for my own stuff. I want to do that under Velvet Room Publishing. So I don't want to change it to like the Braxcast channel or anything like that. So Braxcast to me is just one thing that exists under Velvet Room Publishing. So I personally like to keep the brand Velvet Room Publishing and try to keep building that up rather than going for a name change or making a separate channel and moving Braxcast over to that. And Zay Comics is out of here. Thanks for popping by. That was really cool. But let's see. Mark Park. Oh yeah, claimed Joe Bennett left Nazi messages in Alpha Corp. So I probably shouldn't have watched that. But yeah, kind of a bit off the rocker on that one. We got PB in the chat. I haven't seen him. Says he nitpicks, makes up nonsense, pushes opinions of facts. Needs to get a dog and find another hobby and be happy. Harsh words might be true, but I don't want to get too much into it. I don't want to be like a guy that denigrates. But he's left comments on my channel on my reviews, so you can check out my reviews, especially my Blood Roof review and my Gooding review, or the ones that he disliked the most of mine. And he liked my Cyberfrog Dark Harvest review. That's I think that's the only review of mine that he had no issues with. It's just that I didn't mention Scorpio, but I was critical of Cyberfrog Dark Harvest, and that's why he liked it. I think so. But yeah, I mean, I just like to, like I said, I just give my honest thoughts. I do ramble a lot when in general, but what I do with the book is I just read it. I make a written review, and then I just film it, and then I make sure that it's one clean take where I don't have too much filler. But that's really what it is. I really ought to like have like a script and some notes, so that way like I'm hitting good points on it. Because there's always stuff where I do a review because I'm so unscripted. It's like, oh, I wanted to mention this, so I should have mentioned that. So I want to be a bit more structured, but it's been like a bit of a process, and I've been focusing on getting like more reviews out than having less reviews that are more structured. Let's see. So on today's earlier stream, Eric broke his microphone stand. I wanted to watch that stream, but I was actually busy. So one of the cool things that I did do was I took an aptitude test to join an electrician's unit. I passed that. So next summer, they're going to interview me. If they like me, become an electrician's apprentice for a union, which of course, unions aren't, they have their issues, but be a cool gig. And I think that's like a good career building move. But of course, I can always get into the trades through non-union ways. But I did that. It was about, I don't know, I spent maybe 30 or so bucks in a couple hours of my time through the application process online, driving like half an hour away from my place to take the test. And of course, like 30 or so bucks to send my transcripts to them, which I haven't gotten yet from what I know, but I'm sure look at them soon. But yeah, that's what I did this morning instead of watching the stream. I wanted to watch the stream, but I had to make that. Yaira's been really good so far. I agree with you, PB. Those first 3 issues of Yaira, so 1, really solid. Number 2, definitely, like, since it's a 56 pager, there's so much going on. I felt like it was paced a bit weirdly. But number 3, they really tied it together, the Saskas. Like, they did a really good job of giving us a really solid conclusion to everything that was built up in 2, while also introducing a lot of really cool stuff. And when I finished number 3, and I mentioned this in my review, it's like I can wait for number 4, and I don't feel like I absolutely need it. Of course, I want to read Gyra number 4. Like I'd love to have it right now and read it. But it's like I could wait for it. I can be a bit more chill for it. But it's not like when I read Gyra 2, it's like, well, I need number 3 because like she's such a like she's in such a precarious spot. But with number 2, she's such a precarious spot. It's such a cliffhanger. But number 3, of course, it has that cliffhanger. But it's like a really satisfying conclusion. It's like, oh man, really can't wait to see what they do next. That's how it felt about issue 3. Too much going on. I can understand that, but for me, I felt like it really tied things up together. But there is a lot going on. It's one that you really have to digest. But I think 3 did a better job than 2 in that regards. And like I said, ending was much more satisfying for me. But that's how a lot of comic book endings go. They end on cliffhangers. That's the trope, and some cliffhangers are going to be more satisfying than others. And I think that's the balancing act you got to play, is that you got to have some that set up the next story, but also be a satisfying conclusion. And then you also have to have some that are just like really tense, like Gyra 2. Let's see. So Garfield is saying he thinks Gyra 2 is paced better than Gyra 1, but he definitely thinks Gyra 3 is better than both. Will you guys review it on Nick Weiser? So Nick has a consistent like schedule for that time slot. He's got other guys he streams with, so he doesn't want it all to be Rippaverse stuff. So the next thing we're going to be talking about, I'm not sure. I'll just say it, is Norfolka is the next thing we want to talk about for sure. Is when that comes out, when that's fulfilling, we'll be talking about Norfolka. Maybe Yaira 3, but that's something you'd have to ask Nick Weiser about. You'd have to like really make a stink about him, saying, we need you guys to do more Rippaverse talk on his Saturday show. So since it's his show and he doesn't want to have it be all about Rippaverse, he's prioritizing what we cover, and Norfolk is what he's prioritizing, which of course
that's not fulfilled yet, so we can't talk about it yet. Of course, Andrew could, but that that wouldn't make any sense for that to happen. But 60 people, man, it's like the most. It's like my biggest live stream. So thankful for you guys. But yeah, so that's where we're at. So you'd have to talk to Nick, to if he wants to make that happen. Of course, I'm 100% willing to do it. I loved being on those 2 streams. Even the last one was dozing off a bit. Felt really bad that I was like falling asleep during that stream. But hopefully that doesn't happen again now that I'm getting back onto a normal sleep schedule. I won't be passing out. But yeah, the next thing we'll be talking about will be Norfolka on Nick Wise's stream. And I guess I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that. I don't think I'm going to get in any trouble. But that's the next thing we'll be talking about. So when Norfolka comes out, we'll be doing a roundtable on that, which will be really, really cool. Of course, can't wait to read Norfolka. Let's see. Yaira 2 was constantly paced for PB, didn't pick up or slow down, just really good writing throughout. I thought it was really well written. Of course, you have the introduction of Neptune. You've got Cleto, you've got Neptune's son. So there's a lot of really cool stuff. Of course, you got Yeshua there as well. Really cool introduction. Of course, number 3 really builds on like Yeshua's character. Of course, it builds on the Magni. It's such a really so cool that what Yaira 3 does and building with Yaira 2. But like I said, I felt like it could have been paced a little bit better, but at the same time, there's just a lot going on. So when you read all 3 of those issues, Yaira 1 through 3 in one sitting, you're not going to have those issues because you can just read one after another and it's all going to make sense. And of course, Deborah does a fantastic job just tying it all together. Absolutely fantastic job. Let's see. So looking forward to Norfolka, but not as excited. Can't wait to see how he feels about it. Oh, yes. I think actually, yeah. Thing that I've got is that I've got most of the people who are watching on Twitter, not YouTube. That makes sense. Man. Which is really, really cool. So people are being really active on Twitter. So like when I'm seeing the StreamYard number, it's adding both. So I don't have a lot of YouTube viewers. That actually makes sense. So that's why there's the difference there. Although that's me thinking out loud. Let's see. Looking forward to Norfolka, but not as excited. Can't wait to see how I feel about it. Yeah, I'm really excited for Norfolka because Norfolka is going to give us a lot of insight into the mythological stuff. And of course, you read this Ripazine review. Of course, it's got a interview of Norfolka from Revolver Rick, which is really cool. I really like that. So I'm more hyped for reading Norfolka. I'm more hyped for reading Norfolka Glorious Death after reading Ripazine 4. And like I said, I think there's going to be a lot of cool lore stuff. So even if it's not up your alley, Ram, and it might not be, I think if you're a fan of the Rippaverse in general, which I think you are because you watch my streams and you read the books, that you would you like the lore of the Rippaverse, and I think Norfolka is going to give us some pretty foundational lore in the same way that like Bloodroof is doing for us. I think Norfolka is going to do that as well. So on that basis, it'll be a pretty cool one. Like Great War Separation. So even you don't like war stories, it just gives us a lot of information about the Rippaverse. And yes, Ram's definitely a fan. So I think on that basis, Norfolka is going to be appealing because he's going to give us some good insights in the Rippaverse. But if it's not like up your alley genre-wise, you might not enjoy it as much. Although, of course, I'll do my review. I'm going to mention, what works and what doesn't. But for most of the times I read the Rippaverse books, I don't have very many complaints for those because I think they're good books. Maybe that makes me a shill. I don't care. Let's see. So some people want a lot of action. Some prefer story and not as much action. Variety makes the world go round. Definitely agree. I think the Rippaverse has got a lot of good variety. Of course, a lot of good genres. But there's been a really good amount of action. Of course, Horseman #1 was a book that did not have a lot of action. Like that first issue of Horseman was not very action heavy, as it just had to be because Chuck had to do a lot of establishing work with getting Hector into the place where he could be going guns blazing like a character like him should be. And like I said, Ram was like loving how Horseman 1 didn't have much action. I like that as well. I don't think that's a bad thing. It just shows that like Chuck chose to really focus on character development and exposition for Horseman. And then it just established. And then once we got that, we can just go guns blazing. Which is why the ending for Horseman 1 is so good, because it's like, yes, he's finally ready to go. And #2 is just going to have a lot more action, and it's going to be there's still going to be character development, but it's going to be in the context of all these action scenes. Whereas #1 is really just I'd say slow, but much more relaxed and much more focused on these characters. Much more focused on developing the character of Hector, which, like I said, it had to be because they had to deal with the fallout from Oakland Forest Park and had to get him to a point where he was established as a character in the ongoing series rather than just as a one-shot character. Let's see, Rams also collecting too. If there's any art books left later on, I might get them. So some of the cool art books, of course, you got art of Joe Bennett, you got art of Cliff Richards, which I think is a cool one. You only have 2 CGC copies. I don't have every single graded CGC signature series because near the end, the most recent ones like Yair Free, I only have cover C. And same with Great War, Separation 2, and Zalen. I have select ones of those, but I have basically every single one. I have 3 collector's boxes full of them, and I've got the 4th one. It's starting to fill up, so I have a problem with CGC copies of the Rippaverse. So I'm gonna I gotta organize them all by issue because it's still a bit of a mess since I didn't have the space for it, but now I do. So in my my other room, my bedroom, I've got the 4 boxes off in a corner, and I'll probably show off those. I'll just do a short and saying, here's all of them. You guys can mourn my wallet with me. Let's see. So yeah, but art books, I'm not sure if there are any art books, but the art books are really cool. So if you want to get those art books and slab them, and never touch them, then you can still check out the content because I have covered every single one, every single art book I've covered on Braxcast, including the concept art book, because I got the concept art book. Actually, I should say, I've bought free copies. So I got the first one with the original Isom campaign. I read it, and then I got it graded. The second copy I got there on Rippaverse Day. And then I reviewed it on Braxcast, and then I gave it away. And then on, I believe it was also they did the Isom signature series, and that included the Isom concept art book, and I was able to snag a signed signature series concept art book. So I have one of those as well. So I have 2 of the concept art books, the Isom, the one released with Isom, and I've covered that. So I've covered all that entire 16-page art book, which is a really small art book. It's more of a collector's thing for $75. So a bit, I guess you could say it was overpriced, but I still find it to be pretty good. It's still a really cool thing to read, and it's got a lot of cool information in it. And it was definitely something for the really hardcore people wanting to get on the ground floor. PB is asking if I have a copy of Amazing Spider-Man 252. I do not. Only graded copies I have are Rippaverse. I only Spider-Man floppy I have a Spider-Man versus Punisher issue from 1990. And then somewhere in one of my long boxes, or I guess my long box, actually, I guess I have 2. One of my long boxes, I think if it survived the move with me, I've got 90 people watching here. Of course, most of them on Twitter. I love having, it'd be nice to have the watch time on YouTube, but you guys are watching on Twitter, which is fantastic. But I have, let's see, I have Amazing Spider-Man, trade paperback, that was with Ryan Otley as the artist. I have one of those, and the only Spider-Man books I have are those 2. So I'm a complete. I mean, if you guys want to call me a tourist, a comic book tourist, that's perfectly acceptable. I would say that I basically am, but I would say a newbie is probably more the apt term, since I'm not pretending to be super knowledgeable and everything Marvel and DC, because I'm really not. I've read some stuff, emphasis on some, very little. I've read some New 52 Batman, City of Owls, maybe some Batman and Robin, but I remember reading City of Owls, that sort of stuff. Read basically that. Like I said, read all of Invincible. That's not Marvel and DC, of course, and it's really, really bad. I read that one Spider-Man tree, which I liked, but getting into Marvel and DC is a bit of a challenge because there's just so much nonsense with it. But I'd love to go to my local comic book shop and ask them, hey, what's a good Avengers trade. What's a good Justice League? I said trade Omnibus and just read all of that just to get in on it. And of course, I did pick up some Punisher back issues. Got to read those. And I picked up like the Thing, like going through like the Marvel universe, and it looked really cool. I was flipping through it, and I got to read that. It's like a double issue. I spent like $8 on that. So that's definitely one I want to read and review. Let's see. So Horseman 2 is at 81K. Hopefully these books continue making six figures. And the thing about that, Ram, is that the collections themselves, and I guess, we ought to go. I've talked about Rippaverse games like ad nauseum. And like I said, I think that discussion there is, what I want to say on that. Of course, we can go to share screen, and we can go to the window. We go to Rippaverse.com, and we can go to the Horseman number 2 collection, and we can add this to the stage, man. Of course, this is going to fulfill in 21, or it's going to end in 21 days. It's going to fulfill by the end of this year. Yeah, like Ram said, $81,000. It'll probably make over $100,000 at the collection end. But the thing about this is that this number is going to end in 21 days, but people aren't going to stop buying the book when the collection ends. It's the same thing for Death Shroud, same thing with all the Rippaverse books. So people who want to say, oh, Horseman number 2, let's say it ends at like $102,000, right? It's a failure because it didn't make $200,000. Well, in a year from now, the book could have made $200,000 with the store sales. And Andrew has said this, that Horseman's been a pretty consistent seller at cons and in the store. So the evergreen sales, that's not something they publicly release. Of course, I floated the idea of them doing monthly numbers, of them releasing their sales numbers, like on a tab up here, where you could say maybe like about, or like you could say like sales, and have like what Chromicon, does. And they still kind of do, even though they really don't have good data anymore, because Diamond went bankrupt and the distribution got tossed around between like Penguin Random House and a couple other companies, to my knowledge. So it's really just estimates, and of course, most of the numbers are abysmal. Of course, you'll get a Spawn here, you'll get a Battle Beast, I believe, is doing pretty well with the LCSs. So you'll have some stuff that sells pretty well, but most of the stuff, abysmal sales, because nobody wants to read like the homosexual Superman. Nobody wants to read the Harley Quinn farting issue. There are a couple of people that do, but the people who do, they usually pirate them. So not really appealing to people who have money. And that's what you need to do. That's what they used to do, right? But they don't do that anymore. So that's why they're really in the gutter. And it's really sad for the LCSs. So a lot of them surviving off of selling manga, merchandise, and of course being hosting spots for, like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that, which my comic book shop is actually my new one, which is like 10 minutes away from me. Has a whole section of their store where people come in and they play, D&D and Pokemon and stuff like that, and selling the trading cards and selling all the associated merchandise with your Warhammer miniatures and your pieces for Dungeons and Dragons and all that stuff. It's going to make them more money than selling the new releases. Of course, I go in there and I've gotten like some great comic book boxes. I was able to get Battle Beast 4. I couldn't get Battle Beast 3. I had to go to Newberry to get Battle Beast 3, but I was able to find Battle Beast 4 when I went there, which was really fortuitous of me. Let's see. So Erica said every book keeps selling after campaigns close. He did say that they sell and ship comics every day. Exactly. Exactly, PB. And that's what I'm mentioning, or that's what the point is that I'm making, is that to say that the Rippaverse is a failure because of the collection numbers is misguided, when those numbers are not what the Rippaverse sells in total. So they're most likely making 5 figures, 5 to 6 figures a month in total between their collections and their store sales. Of course, when you've got something new that comes out, and someone like me who's bought every single book, and I'm not going to the store and buying stuff after the fact, because I don't really have a need to buy Isom number 3, because I got it when the collection comes out. But if someone gets really into the Rippaverse, they got like, let's say a couple hundred, maybe like $100 or so to spend, they buy all 3 copies of Isom, then that's free book sales. So Garfield saying, I prefer to feel the comics in my hands. Also, I've purchased books after the collection had ended. makes sense. Of course, there's people who hear about it, but then they have to, they get in on it afterwards because it's like, you got your budgetary restraints in the month that it comes out or the weeks that it comes out, and then you get the money afterwards and you back it here. And like I said, I do like going. It's nice to go into the store, like actually hold the book, flip through it a little bit, then go and buy it and walk right out with it. That is the experience that the crowdfunders had to offer as an alternative. And I've wanted to write an article about this. And I had this like the modern comic book industry and talk about the issues with crowdfunding as an alternative to the LCS model. Because it really isn't. And of course, to be fair, I think it's not meant to be. And I think for the people that works for it works because of course you got people like Rini, you've got Dave Brink from Genuine Comics. They use a crowdfunding well, John Longbox, and they do it well. And of course they need time to make the books and they actually follow through. But of course you got people who are chronically unproductive. Like I don't need to like bring names into it, but you know the people we've talked about. I've talked about them before, but I'd rather not get into the weeds. But you got people who use the crowdfunding model. They're chronically unproductive, and they turned a lot of people off to crowdfunding comics, which is unfortunate because you've got people who use the model well, like John Longbox. He broke his neck in a car accident. He still got his book out in a timely manner. Like the year that I backed it, I got Heroic Tales #1. Fantastic book. Of course, for a first effort, it was really good. Not to say that like I was, saying it's a bad book. I'm only saying it's good because it was his first effort. But it was a good book. Especially like the Father's Day, story was, a bit, I don't know, condensed as a story, but it was still pretty good. It was a good introduction to his universe. And then, of course, I think it was the suit or whatever was a bit confusing to me, but I generally liked it. It was a good book. That main story was good. That backup story was decent as well. And like I said, for a first effort, and I've done like Pumpkin Prince from Just Call Me Insane. That was like her first comic. So when I'm reading somebody's like first book, I'm always going to be like a bit kind of so like if the Rippaverse puts out, a book now and it has like issues that let's say something like Pumpkin Prince would have. I'm not saying Pumpkin Prince is a bad book. Let's just say like it has like like a obvious formatting errors or it's like really short or something like that. Like they put out like a 30-page book or something like that has like nothing going on. It's just like the beginning of something. Well, let's say they did that for Norfolk. I'd be like, what the hell, guys? Like you are a multi-million-dollar company. You can't put out a 30-page book where barely anything happens, right? But where Pumpkin Prince #1, where it's really just basically introducing the world that Just Call Me Insane is putting, or Missy from Just Call Me Insane. That's one I'm going to be like, okay, I see what you're doing, and I'm interested for the second issue, right? Whereas, with the Rippaverse, they don't really have an excuse because, Eric and his team have like this, millions of dollars at this point in sales. So they have the coffers to make full-length comics, that 50 to 100 pages and actually give us solid, meaty stories, right? Of course, we've got most of the people, guys, over 300 people watching on my Twitter. It's just insane. Let's see. Broad Blue after the campaign ended. Exactly. It's fantastic. Let's see. Yeah, can't wait for the Rip reveal. Has another one been announced? I don't believe it has been. Let's see. Ram saying what were they thinking about the homosexual Superman? Technically, it was Superman's son, John Kent, who's the homosexual. Of course, he had his like a pink-haired boyfriend whose power was being like invincible or whatever, because it just couldn't get hurt. So that way it was like as PC as possible. So it was just I didn't read it, but it got Gabe to quit DC Comics and go work as a color for Isom 1 and 2, the original ones. And then of course he's doing his own thing with Big Bang Comics. And I believe the first ever comic review I did on Velvet Room Publishing was Dean Cain All American Lawman. And that one's done pretty well, especially like after I published it. So you talk about like books, selling after the release date. I have reviews that, people will watch them weeks or months after. Like the Blood Roof review, I sometimes go on my YouTube analytics. I'll see people give it a couple of views. Same thing with Horseman, especially like when Horseman #1 came out, people watched my Welcome to Forest Park review, see like, oh, I want to buy that one. Of course, you guys, there are people who actually watch my reviews and like them, which is a really weird thing to me. I remember when Mugen Lord, we did Vampire Killers, and I reviewed his book. I bought and I reviewed his book, and he was like, I was really shocked to see this. I watched your reviews. Like, I'm surprised people watch my reviews and like them. He said I like it. So really cool to see stuff like that. And it's really cool to see me. Like, my goal is to become the indie comic book review guy. And of course, I feel like I'm slacking on that a little bit because, I got some books I need to review for this month, but that's what I want to do. I want to be like, not only just like a comic book review guy. I want to get into Marvel and DC, but like indie comics. Of course, Rippaverse is my specialty because I do Braxcast and I've reviewed every Rippaverse book. But, I've reviewed Fiendish. I've reviewed a bunch of genuine comic stuff. I've reviewed Dark Harvest. I've reviewed, of course, like I said, Dean Cain, All American Lawman. I reviewed, the Rippaverse End stuff. And I'm forgetting exactly what else. But I reviewed lots of stuff, and I want to review more, God willing. Let's see. So if you put out multiple titles at the same time, crowdfunding is in the way. Eric did it like a business, have the funds up front and build a business so it self-sustains. Exactly. And PB is also saying that crowdfunding is very limited and guys don't market themselves and get mad when you point it out. Yeah, that's the issue I have with selling my books. Of course, I have I don't have comics. I want to do comics, and I want to do it the way where I cash flow it myself. And then when I drop it on FMC, I'm just using it basically as a pre-order. I do the print run, and then I get it out to you guys within like a couple of months. If that, like maybe a couple of weeks. It just depends on how long it takes a printer to give me the turnaround. Of course, nothing yet, but I have a story that I'm writing, because if you go on velvetroompublishing.com, you become a paid subscriber, you can read A Cleanup in the Diner. And that's a short story I wrote for a writing contest, and I believe it's one of the winners on that, which is really cool. But if you read that short story, I'm currently turning that, and I've really slacked on this, especially since the move. Like, so much has happened with the move. But I'm like 3,000 words into that. I want to turn that into a full-length novel and then have a comic come out that is piggybacking off of that, or ought to say that associates with that. And then it basically be like the beginning of that story. So if you read A Cleanup in the Diner, I want basically like turning that into a comic book. Of course, like sprucing it up a little bit in terms of the story, because there's more I thought about as I was building this up as a story. Let's see. So, but basically turning that, and then if you guys, let's say I make like $10,000 to $20,000, that's like over the moon off of my first comic book. Then of course I could make that into a full length book, a full length comic where I take the novel that I wrote and basically get the artist, whoever I work with, and commission that into like a full length book and put that out there, right? If it does, let's say 2 to 5 or something like that, or it makes a couple $100, who knows? Then I'd have to wait a bit before I put that out, or I move on to the next thing. But yeah, that's the thing issue I have with Velvet Room Publishing is like marketing myself. I'm so bad at that. So I'm not going to complain that I barely have any sales. The most sales I've had for Machine Demand has been when I go in person at PorkFest, and I've actually sold the books to people. People like Machine Demand. Of course, I wrote From Men to Machines. I published that this Monday. I haven't had any sales on that yet, but if you guys want to check that out, it's a prequel to Machine Demand. And I'd like to turn both of those into comics as well, like full-length graphic novels. But one of the things I want to draw those myself, but I am like years away from putting out decent comic art. So there's a lot of stuff I want to do, but like I said, I've just been busy with this move, and I'm still and of course I'm working all the time. I just got off of the night shift into the day shift, so it's going to take a bit for me to get my mojo back. And once the mojo is coming back, hopefully I can hit the ground running and actually get back to the creative stuff that I've been doing. God willing, by the grace of God, all this will happen. And if it doesn't, then that's all providential. But so really talk about the Rippaverse. So Mugen Lord is very passionate about his universe. I agree with you, Mike. He certainly is. And of course, his second issue is going to be like a 70-pager, so he's going to really give us a good look into that. So I'm excited for that. Definitely going to back that and do a review. You can check out my review of Vampire Killers. I reviewed his book. I was like one of the last books I reviewed when I was in New York. So it was cool. And he was really, really appreciative of that review. And I'm appreciative that he did good work. And of course, his book takes after like that manga style. I like it. I think he worked with a good artist on that book. Of course, some things are a little bit flat, but like I said, that was his first book, and it was perfectly serviceable. It wasn't bad art. There's plenty of books with worse art out there. And I think, like I said, the story that's building up is actually pretty interesting. Of course, like you said, Mike, he's got this whole universe flowing around in his head, and I can't wait to see what he does with it, especially if since the second issue is going to be like 70 pages or so. We're going to get a really good look into that, which, was my biggest, like, I'd say, criticism of that first issue was that, like, it's only a 30 pager or so. And of course, you got the digital issue, you could spend $5 and read it. But like I said, like Garfield said, I like to hold the book in my hands and read it. Of course, I have the filming set up there. And one of the books I want to review is Super Killer, because the PDF has been floating. I actually read it today. I think it's decent. I don't think it's a bad book. Would I be disappointed if I backed it for 25 or so bucks like 3 years ago and I'm only getting it now? Probably. I don't think it's like it's not a knockout or anything like that, but it's perfectly okay for a first effort. And of course, it's like really tropey. But I don't think it's a bad book. But I probably would print out, like I did with Vatican City 1 and 2. I haven't read Vatican City 3 because I need to find it and read it. But I probably will get the trade and just review Vatican City 3. And I think that releases, it might release in October. So it might be like a couple of weeks from now at this point, when the trade paperback for Vatican City releases. And I'll just buy that and I'll just review Vatican City like that. Or Vatican City number 3 like that, where I physically go through it. But with 1 and 2, I got review copies of those, so I actually printed those out. I liked 1 and 2 a lot. Like Narwhal and Mark Miller did a really good job of Vatican City 1 and 2. And I'm sure number 3 really tied things up pretty well. If I can only ever get around to reading it. I also thought VK was too short. That's the biggest complaint. But he's really going for that for number 2, where he's going to make it longer. And I think going forward, he's going to make longer books, especially like when you're an indie and you can't get like a smaller indie company like he is, and you can't get those good print rates. You need to have the longer books to justify to the consumer the higher prices. Of course, it's not as much of a problem for digital comics, but there are a lot of people like me, like Garfield, who want to buy the physical books, which means you're going to have to pay for the shipping as well as the book itself, which means you're going to be paying a bit more. So you want to get more pages out of that, higher cost. And again, if it's printed well, if it's a good story, and you're, running an honest to God business, then a lot of people are going to jive with you and they're going to be willing to pay more for something like that, especially if you're, like I said, people like what you're doing. They're going to be more supportive of you. That's the thing. That's the thing right there. But it was like 20 or so bucks for that. And it was like, yeah, it's a bit expensive, but it's understandable since, it's his first book and he doesn't have like, the printing rates that, Marvel, DC, and, the Rippaverse does, right? In terms where you can get these really good print deals because you're printing at that high volume. He's not printing at that high volume, so you have to pay more for that. But you got the digital copy for that, so it does alleviate that. But, for me and other people want those physical books, want to read physical comics, then that's the way to go. But with Super Killer, I probably would just, open up like OBS and just go through the PDF and just give my thoughts on it, because I don't feel like wasting printer ink to print out the PDF pages of Super Killer and ramble on about it. But I think I ought to review it since people have talked about it. But if you guys absolutely don't want me to, I probably wouldn't. But I don't see why you guys wouldn't. I think you guys want to see me give my take on it. But let's see. Ram is saying the Rip Reveal being a yearly thing is they're going to do now. I'm not sure if we said that last year's Rip Reveal. I believe that they're going to say they're going to do it when it's justified, which I think is a really good thing. I'd love for it to be a December thing where they talk about what's coming up in the next year. Basically, like the last reveal was. It was the last Friday of December. It was December 27th, 2024, if I believe I'm remembering correctly. So it's the last Friday of the year. It's a really cool showing. And of course, we got a lot of really cool stuff. Of course, that's where we got Norfolka announced, which made it like a really good Rip Reveal. Because if Norfolka wasn't announced in that, people would have been really, really salty with that. It would have become like a meme if they kept doing Rip Reveals. And let's say we're 3 Rip Reveals in and we have no Norfolka Glorious Death, then it would have been like a meme like a 1,000-Year Kingdom remaster for Nintendo Direct, or like Mother Free. Well, more Mother Free is more of the apt term or apt meme, where it's like, where's Mother Free? Is it going to be announced this Nintendo Direct? And it would have been a very similar meme that would have formed. But had no opportunity to form because it was in the first Rippaverse where we're getting a Norfolk book, which is really, really cool. It's something the fans really wanted to, and shows that actually listens to the fans, which I think is really cool. Let's see. Let's see here. We've got. I don't know. I feel like since I got like 400 people watching me on Twitter, I ought to be entertaining. I certainly wanted to talk about, like I said, the Rippaverse video games, but of course, like I said, Eric did this live stream. It's a 2-hour live stream. Again, it's going to be mostly just him talking about, the types of games that are pretty cool. But you've got, like Mortal Kombat here. So like a Rippaverse fighting game would be a really cool thing to do, right? And I think if you had like a beat 'em up or a fighting game, that really plays into the couch co-op sort of fan base, which of course it's decline. I'm not sure how much it's declined is the best term to use, but of course people like to play online. But doing couch co-op is really cool. I think the Switch really revived that because when I went camping, I brought my Switch 2 with me when I went to this last Pork Fest, and I did mention to like one of the moms there that had a Switch 2 in front of her kid. So this like 10-year-old kid brings his his friends, and they're playing Smash on my Switch. Of course, I only had the 2 Joy Cons with me, so I had to take turns playing with my Switch, but they were having a lot of fun on that. So like this, the Switch as like itself in a unit where you can just put it on a table, pop off a Joy-Con, give it to your friend, and you can play together like that. It really revived like that local co-op gaming where it had really died in the I don't know with the PS4, or I guess the 8th generation is the term to use. It's where it really died off. Like the 360 and the PS3 they had that was still like an expectation where like you could pop in like Halo 3 or ODST or Reach and you could still play split screen and stuff like that. But when the PS4 and the Xbox One came around, and Microsoft can't name their consoles at all, Sony's got that basic naming structure. You got PlayStation, and they just like, let's do 2, 3, 4, 5, and maybe 6 will be the last one. Who knows? Apparently already making the PS5, PS6, which PS5 existence is barely justified. PS5 Pro doesn't need to exist. A PS6, like PS5 barely has any games, if any. PS6 is going to have no games. And that's the unfortunate thing. And apparently most of the games that are making Sony any money are free to play games anyway. So really sad situation where gaming is at. I watched a Spawn Wave video where he mentioned that. I was like, yeah, executives don't know what they're doing with the video game industry, which is sad, which is all the more reason why you would want to have someone like, Eric July and the Rippaverse to come into the gaming industry and actually start moving and shaking and putting stuff, games for gamers, right? And of course, to make a game that competes with like God of War or Grand Theft Auto or World of Warcraft is going to take millions and millions of dollars, and they're not quite there yet. But like I said, if you put out a game that is like going after, modeling itself after Mortal Kombat, and you're going after, a fighting game that has a very simplistic graphical style that has like a really simple way of being played. Let's see. So 49 till Horseman reaches 82K, and we can refresh that here. And like I said, almost at $82,000. So if there are, I don't believe there are stretch goals for this one, or milestones, is what they call them. I know, and I didn't mention this on the. You can get this here. This is one of the things. So the milestone. So for that, like, get the next figure greenlit at 5,000, 10,000 figures sold. The third figure goes live, and then we get some Prime Evil feature reveals. So 436. So action figures, I think they're decently popular, but it's more or less something that, like I said, you're really going to get those sales in retail. So distributing to local comic book shops, distributing to like Walmart, Target. I think that's where you would get those big sales in retail. So I think that's really where it ought to be. And I think a lot of people, like with the way the economy is going, with how high the cost of living is, If you're going to have discretionary spending to spend money on comic book stuff, you're going to want to spend it on the comics itself rather than the action figures. But definitely think it's a decent showing for it. But it's not like knock it out of the park. It's not like where I thought an action figure would be with like on the back of Isom #1, but Isom 1 and Isom 2 really flashes in the pan, like lightning in a bottle, and using that to carry this company into a pretty, I would say, sustainable user base or a pretty sustainable fan base that's consistently having these collections go to 5 to 6 figures. I think is one that's really sustainable. Like especially with the fact that it can be a decently lean operation. You don't have as much overhead as Marvel and DC are going to have. Of course, still a decent amount of overhead, but I think the overhead they have in terms of their distribution and their customer service and that is justified with the amount of sales that they're doing. That's my opinion there. Of course, I could be totally wrong, but I certainly do not think I am. But really, really glad to see the fact that like Horseman #2 is doing decently well. And like I said, probably going to make $100,000 in this collection period. Probably definitely going to make more than that as it sells afterwards. And down the line, when you have trades come out, it's going to make more than that as well. So that is that there. But of course, like I said, I didn't want to talk about like the Isom Omnibus collection. Of course, is going to be releasing on Monday. So not this episode of the Braxcast. This episode of the Braxcast is going to be the Rippaverse. Of course, a special interview. You want to know who it is? You're just going to have to tune in tomorrow. So if you're watching on Twitter, I do upload the Braxcast on Twitter. So be sure to give Velvet Room Publishing a follow on Twitter. Most of you guys are watching on Twitter right now, so follow that account there. I do upload the Braxcast to Twitter as well. So if you guys like what I'm doing, upload my reviews. The written reviews as well are on my Twitter, so you can check those out. You can check my Twitter out. Like, so give me a follow there. You'll be able to watch the Braxcast on there, but I also upload it to YouTube. Of course, if I get the 500 subscribers, 3,000 hours of watch time on YouTube, I can apply for monetization. I can start making pennies, and pennies, and those pennies will make me rich. Of course, I think I'm being extremely facetious, but that's the case there. So if you guys like what I'm doing for whatever reason, and you like Braxcast Live, you're going to love tomorrow's episode of the Braxcast because it's going to have an interview. And like I said, if you want to know what it is, you're just going to have to follow me and wait until I upload it tomorrow because I'm going to record the Rippaverse review tomorrow. So I got this there. I guess I'll make myself full screen. So going to do a full in-depth review of Rippaverse #4 like I have done with every issue of the Rippaverse. So I don't release dedicated reviews of the Rippaverse like I do for the comics. Basically have them as episodes of the Braxcast where I go and I review them, and then I give my review on the short story as well. So I did that with like I said, the previous 3 issues. I'll do that with this issue tomorrow, and then I'll do that with #5 whenever I get it, which 5 is going to be an exciting one because that's Andrew's short story. That's, of course, the character of Blue Shift, which I think is a character that's sorely needed in the Rippaverse. So it's going to be really cool to see how the fans respond to that, and then hopefully we do get enough interest where we can get at least a short series that justifies it. And, of course, hopefully it's decent enough where like it justifies that, where Andrew, wrote a solid story. I think it's Echu Souza who's doing the art on that. Let's see. So Ram is sometimes thinking of starting a YouTube channel to talk about the Rippaverse. I think you should go for it if you want to. Of course, Ram, you can DM me on Twitter. You can come on one of these live streams and you can like put your toe in the waters if you want to like, practice like being on camera and like presenting and talking about the Rippaverse. And that gets you out of your shell a little bit to start making your own reviews and stuff like that. You definitely can. So that's I think that's, if you want to do it, you ought to just do it. And with your first, I don't think a lot of my videos that I make, I still have like issues with them. So I still don't think they're really that good. But people watch them, people like them. So your first video is going to have a lot of issues. God knows my first episode of the Braxcast were absolute messes, and it still is a little bit. but you get better as you upload. You figure out what works and what doesn't. You figure out how to like light things, how to frame things. I'm still not the best with framing. This filming setup's a bit better than what I have. I was using like a dog food container to put like a gooseneck tripod, but this one's it's definitely a lot better. Although the ring light has its reflection, which is it's a bit frustrating. With the glare, especially like if the cover is glossy. But I've got it pointing at a way, so I think it's decently better than what I had before. And there's not as much stuff, and I got a decent mic, so the audio sounds good. And of course, like I've linked, I do very basic editing. It's basically I just have a I do like 3, 2, 1. I ramble. I cut out the outro, and then very occasionally will I do a cut in the middle if like I have too long of a pause. But typically, what I do is like I collect my thoughts, like I do the written review, so I go in it with knowing what I want to have that basic outline to talk about, and then I basically just give my review on it. And I think I got a decent audience based off of that. So just find out what works for you. So and then just do it. So if you want to do reviews, you want to talk about like lore, you want to do whatever, and of course you can talk about other things other than Rippaverse. So you can make Rippaverse stuff. You can make stuff about gaming. You can make stuff about Catholic theology. Ram, I know you're doing that. You can talk about. I know you are a Catholic, so you can talk about what it's like going to mass or whatever. So you can do whatever videos you want, and you can do a bunch of stuff, and you find that one thing that works, then you keep doing it. Which is, the thing is that the comic reviews, especially the Rippaverse stuff, is what works out well for my YouTube channel. But I think, like I said, I want it to be a thing that's underdeveloped in publishing, so I want to keep doing it. But I think the way that I have it set up is that I can put out basically anything under Velvet Publishing, and Braxcast will exist under that. And people who know Braxcast and watch Braxcast are going to go and watch that. So that is certainly that there. But man, almost like over 400 people watching right now on Twitter, which is absolutely insane to me. Like, where did you guys all come from? Find it absolutely hilarious. But definitely very, very thankful. So just curious. I'm not even sure if there is a chat. I mean, there is a chat for there is a chat for the Twitter, but I don't think people are posting in it, which that's perfectly fine. All you guys are lurkers, but just rambling on for an hour. And like I said, I wanted to talk more about Rippaverse video games, but I've talked about this before on like recorded episodes on the Braxcast. Like one of the first episodes I did of the Braxcast was me talking about like games that I would like Rippaverse to do. And then I've talked about this on live streams before. So this is something I've mentioned. I think it's certainly a good thing for them to be exploring really hardcore. Because like I said, they're definitely at a point where they can justify making an indie game that is like a fighting game that takes after the Mortal Kombat games that came out before I was around. I was born in '98. I think the first Mortal Kombat game came out like, I don't know, like 92 or something like that. On the Sega Genesis, of course, I know the Genesis version was the preferred one because you could put in the code, or you didn't have to put in the code for the blood. I think for the Super Nintendo you did. So it was definitely more gory. And of course, Mortal Kombat was the game that got the ESRB put into existence. The same thing with the parental advisory label. You got people who were scandalized by Mortal Kombat. And of course, then Mortal Kombat in the modern day then decides to go woke and start like toning things down, which is so freaking hilarious. Is that NetherRealms was capitulating to that. So is my mic still good? Yeah, this cable is not the best. So it could have been that. Is it still good, guys? Hopefully it's still good. Switch to my computer mic. Oh, okay, of course it did. Let's see. But yeah. Let's see. So yeah, I'm back, guys. Sorry about that. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. But yeah, I had a little bit of technical difficulty. So, but I think I don't know. I'm not sure what else I can talk. Like I said, I'm sorry, not like I said, but I've talked about it ad nauseum with Rippaverse games, and I've said my spiel. So, like I said, I've mentioned the fact that my dream game would be something like you say you take like the Spider-Man games on PS4 and PS5, or the God of War games, something on that scale, like a meaty 40-hour main story, 20 to 40 hours of side quests, where you're playing as Yaira and you're just playing out her story. Let's say there's like 20 issues of Yaira that are covered in that game, where it takes place over that main story. And then, of course, you got a bunch of side stuff as well that expands on the story. You can put in a lot of side stuff. You can put in, like, Winslow Valiant. You can have Blue Shift in there. You can have, you can have Gooding as well. You can put in so much stuff in that game where you're playing as Yaira and you're just going around just, like, freezing people and dropping people, from throwing people in the car from skyscraper height. That would be fantastic. It'd be a really, really cool game to play. But of course, a game like that is going to be like $10 million plus to make. So it's a bit unrealistic to have that be the first game, but that's my dream game. Of course, I know Rippa's dream game would be to do, like I said, an action MMO RPG where you create your own except and then you're navigating a forest park game where nothing that happens in that game would necessarily be canon, but it would be based off the comics. But since you're playing as your own except, it would be like a game version of Forest Park where you have these things that happen that are analogous. So if you've read the comics, then you would know what's going on. But if you don't, you can still wrap your head around that. And I think that's Rippa's dream game to make. But personally, I'm not the biggest MMO RPG guy. So an action one would be pretty cool. I certainly would like that, and I definitely would check it out. But for me, my dream game would be like a really good single-player game where you play as Yaira, and it has like that production value that the God of War games have. I know a lot of people, like God of War 2018, and that game came out 7 years ago at this point. Like it came out 7 years ago, and I remember when I got that game on launch day. So it's a bit crazy, man. Because I got that game in college. That's one of the reasons that and Smash Bros. One of the reasons why. Instead of studying and doing my schoolwork, I was playing those games, and that's the reason why I didn't do as well in my last couple of semesters at college. But I did 3 semesters at a 4-year school, and then I got my associates back at home. And no more college for me, man. I'm done with freaking school. But of course, if it got an apprenticeship, then I'd have to do some schooling, some classes, but it wouldn't be like getting a bachelor's degree, although that's a waste of money. So I'm actually kind of glad it turned out the way that it did, because I wasn't burdened with like the average student loan balance, which is like, I don't know, $30,000 plus. So I actually ended up saving some money, if you think about it, although probably wasn't the best thing for me to have done. But anyways, yeah, of course, I haven't really messed around with the original God of War a little bit, but there are people who swear by the original, like 1 and 2, 3 a little bit, but mostly the first 2 God of War games. And those are masterpieces. They're so good. They are the best games in the God of War franchise. And then God of War is just like a really casual movie game. The 2018 one, Ragnarok by extension. And I kind of disagree with that. I can see where, it's definitely made to be more cinematic, but I do really like God of War, and I like Ragnarok as well. I think they're good games. They have massive production value. So, of course, Corey Balrog and Santa Monica Studios are, of course, very liberal, very lefty, but they have good production value, and those games are really well produced. And I haven't come up with that production value before, like a Yaira game, where it's basically just like, the cutscenes don't have any black screens. There's no loading screens or anything like that. Would be so freaking cool, man. Just to have it be like one like continuous experience where you're playing as, like I said, playing as Yaira, just exploring Forest Park would be a really cool thing to do. And of course, you'd have some places where you go to like Iceland, where she has her fight with Yanessa and Yantoni and Magus Newmite and Yaira number 1, and of course you could go into space. Of course, you could have encounters with Zaelin in space, so you could have like more than just Forest Park as well. So there's a lot of stuff you could do with a Yaira game on that with that production value. But that's my personal dream game. But I think a really realistic one for them to do, or like a really simplistic one, would be like a Horseman game that goes after Contra. That would be one I would really like to play. Of course, you could have a beat 'em up game where you play as multiple Rippaverse characters. I know Marvel's done one like that, or Marvel, has licensed it out to have a game like that. And of course, like you could have a fighting game, like I said, like Mortal Kombat. So I think having like a beat 'em up where you could do co-op, like you get like 4 players, you can play as a bunch of Rippaverse characters, just going through levels, just fighting through like Devlings or Club Merc Gangsters or whatever, would be a really cool thing to do. And it wouldn't take much in terms of production value, or it wouldn't take much in terms of budget. In comparison, it's in the tens of thousands of dollars compared to the tens of millions of dollars. I would love for Rippaverse to get to that point one day, but I think you get in at that ground floor of the gaming industry where you're making these, very simplistic indie games that get that attention, and then you get that money rolling in, and then you use that to cash flow the bigger projects, and you also use it to cash flow the animations as well. But I think that it's basically just having that be Rippaverse Studios being the animations, which we do need some longer form animations, would be really cool. Let's see. The Horseman. Let's see. So Ram is saying the horse. Chuck Dixon said this earlier today. The Horseman number 2 is on preorder. The adventures of Hector Caballero continue as he learns about the dark secret of his billionaire benefactor. Yes. As Garfield said in Horseman number 1, there's definitely things about Cal Buxton. I gotta recall his name, that are suspicious and concerning. So that's certainly something that's going to be explored, and it could be a bit earlier. We talked about this in the Horseman 1 roundtable. It's not a matter of if, but when Hector and Cal are going to have this falling out. And I think that's certainly going to be a cool thing. So finding more stuff out about that. So if he finds something out that makes it untenable for him to work with Cal, but he has to be very strategic about that, that's going to be a really cool thing. It's going to add much more drama to the story of Horseman when he already has all these things going on. That makes it really hard for him to do what he does. So glad Hector will find out soon that Bastard is up to rather than waiting till the 5th issue. And I think I agree with you that we're going to get some more insight into Cal's story, but I do think the thing is that Horse is going to have to continue working with Cal until probably at some point after issue number 5. There's something going on outside my apartment, so that's why I got a bit distracted. But it's not going to be until after issue number 5 where this falling out happens formally. But of course, or Hector, whatever you want to call him, is going to find out something about Cal. I imagine in issue number 2, it's going to make it like, I can't work with this guy. I gotta cut myself off from Cal. But how am I going to do that? He's going to have some trouble figuring that out because, as established in Welcome to Forest Park, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed when it comes to being like really subtle and tactical. Of course, he drove his car that he owned. The detectives tag his car, and that's how they find him out, which is really funny. So he's not this like super strategic and stealthy guy, because you see in Horseman number 1, and spoilers. Click off now, go on to your spoilers for Horseman number 1. But he was an Army Ranger. He's used to just going in guns blazing with his team, and that's how all of his team members got killed. But he was able to survive. But they just got this assignment. They went in guns blazing, or just shooting and killing people. And that's what he's used to. So he just doesn't go in with that strategy. So if you're on a war zone, you're not worried about being stealthy. If you're driving a Humvee, you're not worried about people using it to identify. That's what you have to worry about. I think my mic is going out as well. You've got to get a better cable, so it's definitely something I'm going to have to do. But I think that is. I'm not sure. I've been striving for about 90 minutes now. Of course, there's a Death Drive live stream going on. A lot of you people are on Twitter, which is really, really cool. This really, really blew up. So if you guys are following me on Twitter, or not following me on Twitter, you're watching on Twitter, you like what I do, then please follow me on Twitter. But if not, it's perfectly cool as well. Really hoping you guys enjoy this one. Despite the technical difficulties, definitely think I'm going to get it better on me, but I'm going to end it here. I think that's the sign for me to end it here. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode of Braxcast Live, despite it just me being rambling about. I never ramble about the topic I'm supposed to, but hopefully you guys figured this out. But we'll leave this comment for rambling and I'll get on out of here. So Horseman will make Cal sign over his $1 billion company at the end of this and have Patty run the company while he does Horseman activities. I don't think that'll happen, though. That's an interesting theory. We'll see if it happens, but we'll have to wait and see for that to happen. But like I said, I definitely want to get out of here, get myself tuned down for bed. Hopefully you guys have a good night and have a fantastic weekend, but I am out.